Right, well, welcome back to our last theme, top tips for spring crops. With no disrespect to our previous speakers, we are actually arrived now at the best part of the conference. We talk about plants, which are really at the heart of our business. We have three speakers. Firstly, we're going to have Wouter from Rudy Raes Genetics to explain all the mysteries of primroses. Chloe will help you set up a product and growing trial on your nursery. And if the internet works, we'll get Eric on as our last speaker of the day. I will now pass you over to Wouter. We're ready for you now, Wouter.
So, hello everybody. I'm Wouter de Meester from Rudy Raes company. And we are a young plants company since 1927, fourth generation now. And since about 20 years, we are also breeding primroses. So this is just a picture of the company, the young plant production with the trial garden on your right. And on the flag on the left, you can see our slogan that what we try to do is same, but different. On your right. And the flag on the... Okay, I think it's coming through with a little bit of retard. So almost every year we do Primrose Trials, where we compare our varieties, our breeding, with the varieties of our competitors. And that helps us to advance, to see where we don't have the good varieties and where we have to improve. We are also visited by our customers, by seed buying customers, by the bigger growers, who gives us a lot of feedback. Last year, for the first time, we did a Primrose Festival, a Primula Festival, where we invited the business. The year before, every 2 years, we do it in England, with at the Rubens place and another nursery. But last year we did it just before a Corona outbreak at the Raes company. We tried to show to the customers and especially to the wholesale and the business, and I have to admit that we have been inspired by England for that, to do something else with primroses. So not just sell the 6-pack or the 10.5 centimeter pot, but to show, and we did that with the help of a florist, to show how you can really make some artistic things with a primrose. So to value the plant up and not just see it as a cheap garden plant, but to do something with it. Although we specialize in special varieties, we claim to have a variety for every season. And you can see that on this slide, that with the Primus, our early series, which doesn't need any cold period to flower. Evie follows then Ambi, Charlie, Cabaret. So we can offer in standard colors, variety which flowers from October until the end of March. As says the slide, a primrose for every season. The start of the business was with compact varieties, but the biggest sales have always been in a large flower type. Which we call Rambo. In France, it's called Perle d'Alsace by our competitors. There was a lot of Hitor varieties in that. And at a certain time, the large flowers were the most important in the business. What was mostly sold was very big yellow and the other colors more or less average. But we think that with Rambo, that we have a reasonable size, a reasonable large size in every color. The issue we have for the moment is that with all the chemicals being withdrawn from the markets and the heating of the climate getting warmer and warmer, that rambo type is starting to get in early plantings too vigorous. But with our compact types, we have an alternative for that, and we continue to breed further. This is a trial with a customer. We have some trials in England also, but this is a customer which lives at about 15 minutes from where I live, so where I go regularly to watch the cultures. And so in the rambo type, the second slide, you can see the new type, which we will introduce from this summer on. And on the right, you see the current type, where white is too early. So that's a thing that we compare. We put the varieties one next to another on a larger scale before we introduce, to really show where it's improved. Because in a trial on 24 or 36 plants, you can't see enough. The climate change, where you have been talking about this year with the carbon issue, and so we think about that also, and we try to breed strong varieties which can be planted later. Because the biggest issue in sowing of primulas is the heat in the summer. Every time the temperature goes above 23, 24 degrees, the germination gets weaker, and you have big problems to deliver a young plant on time. These 6 varieties, which are on a special page in the catalog, are all of them F1 hybrids. Most of the varieties are F1 now, and they are really strong growing. They are not late varieties, it's mid types. But I can tell you that I have customers which plant these varieties up to week 40, week 41, and still get a big enough plant out of it. It's very important that where you sell the young plants, for example, in the middle of Germany, where they have a completely different climate. I could say that in the north of Belgium, we more or less have the same climate as the south of England, maritime climate. But in the heart of Germany, there you have a continental climate with very warm summers and very cold winters. So also for them, it's important to have these strong growing varieties where they can plant earlier than we do, and the variety grows enough to fill the pot. Also, these varieties can be used to fill up to a pot of 14 centimeters. They do that easily. The breeding is not an easy thing, and I don't know if all of you remember, it's about 10 years ago now that we introduced the zebra, which was a unique color. We had the first prize in France, in the Salon de Végétal in Angers, and also more importantly, IPM in Essen, and the whole business went crazy to get this plant. Actually, at the time when we brought it out, it wasn't the best variety on the market, but it had a unique color. We haven't stopped to continue the improvement of the plant, and now we have a more stable color, a better plant, which supports a little bit more the cold, because zebra didn't support the cold. And this is just to tell you that breeding of seed raised is not the easiest thing, because if it's all F1 hybrid, you need to have strong parents. And you need to keep the parents separately, the father and the mother, really very healthy. You can't do that with tissue culture because that leads to an end. So you really have to make it through seed. And that's why for such a premium product, the higher price is justified. The same thing for Rubens, which is my favorite variety. It was introduced by the wife of our breeder. He married to a Polish lady, and she's a breeder now too. And she worked really strong on the Rubens. Because what we have, I don't know in England, but here on the continent, is that the business is not ready to pay more for something special. A little bit more, okay, but more, which is needed, it's not okay for them. We are still struggling now with this, with the Rubens, and you know, it is the best, in my eyes, the best seed-raised double variety. But you know that double flowers give less seeds, so you have to sell it a lot more expensive. Now, at this time, we are still improving the seed production per plant to get a little bit in the right direction for the price setting. In a larger pot, this price is not a problem, but there's a high demand also for these products in a 10.5 centimeter. And that's where we are struggling with. One special aspect of the Rubens, and we are trying to work on for the other special varieties also, is that we don't see a Primrose anymore as a pure garden product, but more and more as a in-house plant, which will keep in-house for about 2 weeks, well, which is still more than cut flowers. Sparkly is another one of the special varieties. Well, you can all see them in the catalog, which we have online, but that's also a more special product, which can be sold in the normal range. Then we have these double types and half double types. We are more and more working on these things. I have seen in the breeding crazy things. Tulip form flowers. You see that the plant is not always the best in this. It's not the most regular, but we are working to improve that, to get it a lot better. What is working a lot also is selling well. This type is the candy mix, and this is a thing which sells a little bit less well in the UK, but very good in France. Every country has his particularities. So the difficult thing in this is it's only 3 colors, but you have to program them that they flower together, because you have to be able to grow them as a mixture. You can grow them separate and then mix them on the moment of the sale, but smaller growers tend to want to grow them as a mixture. And the more difficult color in this one is the baby pink. So the work to improve that is never finished. Provence is another mixture, designer mixture. Also still working on that to improve. The peach color in that is a little bit smaller than the other colors, a little bit less vigorous, but you have to be able to grow them as a mixture. We grow the parents, the seed of each color separately, but they have to work together in a designer mix. Then, I told you same but different. Well, this is very different. 2 recent introductions where our salesman, Philip Oglesby, was really fond of. When I saw them at the first time, I told this will never work. At least not on the continent, only in the UK. And I will never sell big quantities of this, but this is really different, and we still sell some of them. And Philip is selling more of them every year. So there is a market. And the craziest the color can be, you can never throw it away. We have seen that in petunias. The best example is Crazy Tunia. Completely unstable colors, not even the best garden plant. But if the color is crazy enough, somebody will buy it. Then the latest years, we are working really hard on garden types. I'm sure we're not the only ones. This one is a unique type because it is already autumn flowering, Everlast. So we try to sell this a lot to cities. This plant starts flowering when sown at the right time. It starts flowering in October and it never stops until April. We have tested it in Poland in really cold temperatures, under the snow. They come out again and they start to flower again. This is really the biggest number of buttons of flower I've ever seen on a primrose. And Robin is selling that really well in his garden center. One of my favorites is the Very Star Yellow. And this, we call that a multi-stem. We started with a Very Star with just a crossing of the wild primrose, the Primula vulgaris, and the other wild primrose. And the selection was really quite simple. You plant outside on the field, and you continue to breed with the plants that survived. And you do that again and again and again. So after several years, you can say that the ones who still remain, that they are hardy. So I can tell you they are hardy. They are flowering a big time of the year. They even start in autumn again. I have plants in my garden. Sometimes they make flowers halfway summer. They don't really need a lot to set buds. Interesting for the grower in this is that, in contrary to traditional stemmed primroses, those types are multi-stemmed and they make a lot of flowers. So if it's bad weather and the trade is not working when you have your first flower on it, you can just clean that away and sell it with the second or the third or the fourth stem. The less work you have to do on it, the better it is. I like to compare these plants with Narcissus tête-à-tête, where millions are sold, and which gives a little bit the same effect, a small yellow flower on a stem. And I can't understand that a plant like Fairy Star hasn't been spread more on the market, just because people don't know it enough. Because this is, for the end consumer, a far better plant. The first one was a pale yellow. This is a darker yellow. We have now one that we call Marmalade, quite late flowering, but a lot of stems, really hardy. And this is the latest introduction this year in the catalog. It's orange yellow with even shorter stems than the Very Star. That's why we call it Colibri. And we really hope to make a breakthrough with this. This really thing of being multi-stemmed and giving a lot of flower, consumer plant. I can't stop repeating this. This is a picture I took in visiting a very big grower in France, and this guy makes about 600,000 primulas. And there is only one mixture. So this was the past in the UK. This was the past in our country. This is the present in France. And I hope it's not the future there, because for me, this is really not modern. It's a domination of yellow. It's all the same period. They grow it in a standard pot. They are sold in a 6-pack, in a 10-pack for the cheapest price. So you cannot make more out of this.
Wouter, can I just interrupt you to say we need to round up a little bit now, if you can?
Yeah, okay. I'm almost at the end. I would just like to say one more thing about fertilizers. This is the variety Chameleon. And in the center, you see darker flowers and a darker foliage. And on the outskirts, you see they are pale. And still it is the same variety. And the difference is only fertilizers. In the center, they are from a Belgian grower, a guy who is really crazy about fertilizers to keep it up to the ends. And the other ones are from a UK grower, really good plants, but they only give fertilizer in the start of the culture. And I really want to say that it is important to feed your plants up to the end. Not only visual, they are not nicer than the others, but for the shelf life and for the end consumer. I'd like to thank you. And well, back to you, Robin.
Right. Thank you for that, Wouter. It's very interesting. I think we all have mixed feelings about primroses. Some of us think they're just a necessary evil. Or could it be the perfect way to start spring sales? I would agree with Wouter that Everlast is our best-selling plant of all the primroses. And yeah, we're a bit of a fan of Veristar as well. If I could ask Wouter to stop sharing your screen, and we'll get Chloe to join us soon.
Okay.
Chloe is an ADAS consultant and has worked on many protected crops and is currently working on crops physiology and environmental control. She is a vital part of the bedding and pot plant centre and is project manager of the transition to responsibly sourced growing media. That itself is a big mouthful, and then Chloe's going to explain to us how we could run some trials on our nurseries and actually interpret the results.
Thank you, Robin.
Okay.
Thanks.
Switch your video camera on, Chloe, please.
It doesn't let me. It's got a kind of stop button in front of it.
Carry on talking.
So that's unfortunate. Never mind. Thank you for that introduction, Robin. Yes, as Robin said, my name's Chloe Whiteside. I work for ADAS. I've been with the company for about 10 years, and about 80 to 85% of my work is managing projects and delivering trials. So this afternoon, I'm just going to run through some top tips for effective nursery trials and how you can get the most out of any trials that you may wish to run yourselves on your nurseries. So as a brief overview, what am I going to be talking about this afternoon? Firstly, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What are your aims and how do you stick to that? Preparation is key, so making sure that you're well organised in advance of starting your trial. Then looking at managing your trial organisation, possibly assessments, equipment and analysis that you may need to do, and then ending the trial and a little summary at the end to sum it all up. So starting off with, what are you trying to achieve? Now, it's really important to identify your aim, be clear on the purpose of your trial, and really stick to that throughout. So try not to get sidelined by any other little things that might creep in, or other little things that you think, oh, that could be interesting to look at, because that starts to distract from what the primary aim was of you doing the trial in the first place. And if you kind of go off down lots of different avenues, then actually at the end, you might not really have much that you can really use, and the trial might not be of as much benefit to you. So really try and identify your aim and stick to it. And also keep the trial as simple as possible. So try to avoid lots of treatments or sequential treatments. So if you're possibly looking at a couple of new fungicide products, for example, where you want to just test the crop safety on some sensitive species, then try not to look at too many at once, or try not to make it too complicated by looking at different programs and things like that, because then that's going to start requiring a more robust trial design, and it's going to make interpretation difficult. So you really just want to keep it as simple as possible and something that's manageable, but is still going to be of benefit to you. So in terms of preparing for your trial, then kind of know your topic and do some background research if you can. So is there any literature out there that could be helpful to you? Maybe something has been done in the past, or maybe there's been some recent research that's available. So the AHDB Horticulture website is a good place to start. You can access research projects, fact sheets, various guides, all sorts of things, which might be a good starting point and just kind of point you in the right direction as to what it is that you want to do. Also, talk with other growers. So in this sector of horticulture, we're all very open. People like to talk and share things amongst themselves. It's not too many secrets that are kind of held and buried. So discuss what you want to do with other growers, and maybe they've done something similar that they may be able to help you with, or they might just be experienced in running some trials themselves and they can assist you and help you and give you some advice. And also plan. So draw up a plan of what you want to do and when, and try to stick to it as closely as possible, because things do get busy, as we all know. And if you've got that plan in place to begin with, then it's going to be a lot easier to manage going forwards than if you haven't got one there at the start. So once you've got a good idea of what you're going to be doing with your trial, then you need somebody to look after it and manage it. So that could either be yourself, or it could be a colleague with another person there as a backup. So this gives a sense of ownership to the trial, but it also makes it easier to manage if you've just got those one or two people really focused in on what the trial involves and what needs to happen when, rather than just trying to bring in different people at different times depending on who's available. So make sure that those people that are assigned to look after it understand what the point of the trial is and what it is that you're trying to achieve, because then everyone's going to be going in with the same viewpoint as to what they need to do and what they need to achieve. And it's really important to keep a diary throughout from start to finish, because when you want to look back at this in 6 months or a year's time, you're not going to remember everything. But if it's there in a diary of what happened when, and things that you saw, results that you saw, that's going to be really useful, particularly if you want to do something similar in the following year and can't quite remember how things were done. So referring back to the diary is a really useful thing to do. But it also means there's something there that if your trial manager, your responsible person, goes to leave or is off sick or is away for any reason, then somebody else can take over managing from them and actually have a good idea of what's been done and what needs to be done. And that diary is really going to help them to understand that. So in terms of trial organisation, think about how big can your trial be. So making sure that you have enough space to start with, and making sure that your plants are clearly marked. Now, obviously, there's going to be certain times of the year when you probably wouldn't even think about wanting to do a trial because it's far too busy, far too hectic, space is at a premium, and even just trying to fit a trial in is probably going to be very difficult. But if there are times later on in the season when you are wanting to be looking at different things and maybe trialing stuff, then just make sure that you do have a good amount of space set aside to do that. And obviously making sure that the plants are marked so that other members of the staff are well aware that these are trial plants. They're not to be taken off and dispatched for orders or anything like that. You don't want to be losing plants from your trial. And you want to make sure that you've got an adequate number of pots or trays, whatever it is that you're using, enough of those per treatment. So you want it to be manageable, but you also need to be able to make sure that if you start to see any differences in your plants, that you can attribute that to a treatment effect and not just purely another reason, a physiological reason, or maybe, those plants didn't get enough water or something like that. You want to be certain that what you're seeing is a cause of the treatment rather than anything else. So again, particularly important if it is that you're looking at a new fungicide or something, for example, where you just want to test the crop safety on some sensitive species, then you want to be certain if you're seeing something that could possibly be crop damage, then you want to be able to attribute that to the treatment and not just something else. And you also want to think about where you're going to locate the trial. So try to avoid any known problem areas that you know that you have. So often in glasshouses, you can end up with little hot spots or cold spots. Maybe there's a bit of an area where the floor is slightly uneven, and that could lead to uneven watering and drainage of water through the pots. So make sure that it's in an area that is just as representative as how you would grow your commercial crop. So avoid locating it right in the corner, for example, or right next to the door, like something that could possibly influence what happens with your trial. So if you can, have it in a good area where it's surrounded by the commercial crop, still easy to access for things that you want to do, assessments and what have you, but have it so that it's in a good representative area, and it's not under a leaking vent or anything like that that could impact on the trial. So you want to use healthy and uniform plants. Really important that you're starting off with plants that are even across your trial, because then if you do start to see things later on, then again, that's kind of harking back to this is more of a treatment effect rather than those plants weren't as good to start with as these ones. So make sure that your plants are healthy and uniform, and try and use a range of species of varieties if you can, or it depends to an extent what it is that you're doing. But like I say, if you're testing a product that you're going to use on a wide range of your plants, then obviously it makes sense to have as many of those in the trial as you can, bearing in mind keeping it manageable and keeping the size something that's manageable for you as well. And this is something that's probably quite often forgotten about, but it's important to remember to include a control plot. So this is something that you don't treat, a group of plants that you don't treat, and then that gives you something to compare against. So it could be completely untreated, so you just would water it and that's it, you don't apply a fungicide or whatever it is that you're testing. Or if you're something like looking at different nutritional regimes, for example, then your control could be this is what we do as standard on the nursery, so that's the control, that's what I want to compare against, and then you have your other treatments alongside that. Now, replication of treatments is something that we do in ADAS and within research institutes, because you need to do replicated trials in order to generate robust data, generate statistics, and it's something that we need within the research side of things. If you're just doing a look-see observational trial, then replication is generally not going to be needed. So as long as you've got plenty of pots and trays, whatever it is, per treatment, and you can be confident that you've got a good number that's going to show you any treatment effects, then I'd say you're not going to need replication, because replication is obviously then going to increase the size of your trial. So it's going to increase the cost and the labour input as well. So it's something to think about. Do I need to replicate it or not? And if I do, then can I manage it? And have I got enough space? And have I got the time to dedicate to that trial? A little bit on trial assessments. So plan in advance what you want to assess, and then you can make sure that you've got all the right equipment, and you're not going to miss key timings for doing assessing. And these don't have to be anything complex. It's just something that's beneficial to you and beneficial to the business, and means that at the end of the trial, you can say, yes, that was useful. This is what I learned, and you can take things away from it. And one thing that I'd say is really, really key is just to take lots of photos. So these will be really useful to refer back to when your trial is finished, or if you're trying to explain to a colleague what it is that you've seen. Sometimes that can be quite difficult to kind of put into words what it is that you're seeing. But if you've got the photos, then obviously it's so much easier. And it's just really good to keep photographs and snapshots of the trial from start to finish, because, like I say, if you look back in 6 months or a year's time or something, then they're really going to be very helpful to you. I just bunged on here an example assessment sheet, keeping it nice and simple. So if you were looking at a growth regulator or a couple of growth regulators that were new to you, I just selected Cosmos here. So Cosmos height 2 weeks after treatment, and all you'd need to do is just measure a good representative number of plants. So that's going to depend to an extent on how many plants you've got in the trial in the first place, but measure a good amount at a certain number of weeks after treatment. Keep doing that, and you manage to build up your averages there. So just as an example, water there is a control and 2 growth regulators, and you measure the plants and get your average, and you can see what's happening and how those growth regulators are impacting on your trial, on your plants. So it's nothing too complicated, but it's just something nice and simple, and it's going to give you a lot of information at the end of it. In terms of equipment and analysis, so think about whether you need to purchase anything, or if it's just for short term, maybe you can borrow some equipment. And it all depends on the type of trial that you're going to do. So you might only need a ruler if you're just going to be looking at growth regulators and the effect on height, for example. Or you might need a little bit more equipment than that. So maybe if you're looking at some different nutritional regimes, you might want to look at pH and EC probes, moisture probes, weighing scales if you're looking at irrigation, chlorophyll meters. So we're starting to get into more techie things, but there are quite a number of apps out there now that can be quite useful as well. So Field Scout Green Index, probably a lot of you have heard of that. I think there's other similar apps available, but things on your phone can be just as useful. And so it might be worth considering if there's anything like that that you might need to help you out with your trial. Record your inputs and your environmental data, because they might be important later on when you have possibly seen something in your trial that is a bit unusual, and you can refer back to what the weather was like at that time, so temperature and humidity, which you're going to have anyway monitored on your glasshouse computer, but other things like irrigation requirements. So did you have to water plants more often than others, depending on what it is you're looking at? Weather conditions when applying treatments. So just to build up as much information as possible and get a good picture of what the weather and stuff was like when you were doing your trial. And again, depending on what you're doing, you might need to look at whether you need growing media analysis, leaf tissue analysis, water analysis. So very important if you're looking at nutrition trials, then you're going to be wanting to send things off for analysis, and do that on a relatively regular basis, just to keep a track of what it is that's going on with your crop, if that's something that you're looking at. So then coming on to ending the trial. So once you've collected all the information you need, then you can end the trial. And it might be tempting to keep it running for longer and just think, oh, I'll just let the plants carry on and see what happens. And that's fine. Or think, well, I've got everything that I need to. And if we don't necessarily have too much time or too much space, maybe you need the space back, then it's just a good idea to just call it quits and end it once you've got everything that you need. And then write a summary of the trial detailing your findings. So this doesn't have to be long, maybe 1 or 2 pages. Depends on what you've done and how long it went on for. But that's going to be really helpful for you in the future, not just for you, but for other members of staff or new members of staff to look back on, because it might be something that comes around again, or something that you think about again in the future. And if you've got that summary, then that's going to really help you. Try and keep both electronic and hard copies of all the information, so at least then it's easy to find. It's stored somewhere that other members of staff can access, and share your findings with your colleagues and discuss what you've found, because that could potentially trigger other thoughts into other things you could look at, or people might interpret things in different ways. So it's really good to discuss what you've done and discuss it with your colleagues and kind of talk about how that could help you with your business, or how it could lead to you doing some more trials work potentially. So to summarise, it's obviously important to realise that nursery trials, they do require time and commitment. So don't go into it half-heartedly, because you're not really going to get the benefit of it if you decide to do something and then you just don't end up with enough time, or there's not enough people to help manage it. So really make sure that you or somebody else has got the time that they can commit to the trial to really make it worth doing. Try to keep them as simple as possible and plan carefully, because then that's going to set you up for running a much smoother trial. Ensure that the designated staff member has the time to give to the trial, and if they are going to be away for any reason, that there's somebody else that can step in and take over from them and knows what's been going on. Make sure that you're clear in what you want to achieve, and really try and stick to that. So try not to be led down all different paths and avenues, and just try and focus on what your aim is and what you're trying to achieve. Remember to include a control plot, so something that you can compare against, whether that be your nursery standard or something that's just completely untreated. And remember to choose an appropriate location on the nursery, so avoiding too close to the door, avoiding the corners, avoiding the area where there's maybe drips or a slightly uneven floor. So a good area which is representative of the majority of the nursery. Use healthy plant material, because then that's going to have, if you don't have a healthy plant material, that's going to affect your results later on, and it's going to make things slightly more complicated to interpret. So make sure that you've got healthy plant material to start with. Keep written records, take lots of photographs, and write a summary at the end so you have something to refer back to. And ask for help if you need it. So whether that be people within your company or other growers that you know, or maybe other consultants that you know, that you just want a little bit of advice on how you can really get the best out of your trial, or you're doing something different and you're not quite sure what to do. Just remember to ask for help, because there will be somebody that can help you. And that brings me to the end. So I don't know if we have time for questions now, Robin, or we just leave those till later.
No, I think we're going to take questions in the sessions. Just to remind everybody that we're going to have some sessions at the end of Eric's talk as well, where you can join the top tips session and you can ask questions in person. If you've got any embarrassing plants you want to show, that's the place to do it. I'd like to thank Chloe for her presentation. I think we can all be a little bit more scientific and quantify our results better. Normally we just say it looks a bit better than it did before, or a little bit worse, but this should be a better way. If I could get you to close your presentation, Chloe, and get Eric to load his up, please. So our speaker now is Eric. Eric has been held up at the border. Apparently his peach application wasn't filled in correctly, and we're just waiting for his presentation to make its way across.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Eric. That's great.
Oh, good. But I cannot see myself.
All right. If you click present, I'll tell you when we're ready.
Okay.
So Eric, if you come at last year's conference, is a mine of information on cyclamen and plants in general. It was full of practical information, and I'm sure his talk now on spring crops will just be as good. Right, we are ready to go, Eric. I can see your presentation up, and you've got on your first slide.
Good. Well, sorry for all the trouble I got you in. I got myself in a bit of trouble. I don't know what went wrong, but I had clear vision and I could hear you loud and clear, but obviously you couldn't hear me. Well, anyway, thanks, Robin, for the introduction. Thanks, Chris and Simon, for the invitation. And yeah, I'm happy to be back this year again. Apologies that I'm not a native English speaker, but with Wouter earlier on and Gerben, I think we have a really international convention here, which is a good thing. Let me see. Slides don't work now. Robin.
Right. Bear with me, Eric, and I'll load mine for you. And then if you can see the screen, I will tell you when to click.
I'm not seeing any screen.
Just a sec. Right, just bear with